Welcome to our third special edition in the Economic War Room focused on the Chinese coronavirus pandemic. In our first episode on the coronavirus, we explained that the virus was a real threat. We explained the health threat, and we provided CDC recommendations regarding mitigation and prevention. That was back in February. There were only 60 cases at the time when we made that announcement. Now, if you watched it, you were warned and you had plenty of opportunity to stock up even on toilet paper. We also warned of an economic shock that would come from sheltering in place before it was ever mentioned. In our second episode, which was a couple of weeks ago, we dealt with the economic and market impacts. When that aired, the market was near its recent low. In fact, it was shortly after that below the level from when President Trump took the presidency. Within 2 days after airing, however, the market made a short-term bottom and jumped 4,000 points on the Dow Jones Industrial Average in less than a week. That was 22% gains in just 3 trading days. Now, I'm not making investment predictions. We're not providing investment advice, but we are sharing timeless wisdom, and we're trying to help you navigate these waters. For example, I quoted my old boss, Sir John Marks Templeton, who said, "To buy when others are greedily buying or selling, to buy when others are despondently selling, and to sell when others are greedily buying requires fortitude but pays the greatest potential reward." Sir John, he's gone on to his reward. Forgive me for botching your quote, but that's such timeless wisdom. To buy when others are despondently selling and to sell when others are greedily buying. I don't know if it's the right time or not. I don't know if today the market, it was down, then it was up, and it was, it's all over the place. But just remember, there will be a time to buy, and when it comes, you should be ready. Now, we told you what to look for when you are ready. You got to look for stocks of great companies selling at ridiculously low valuations. Some stocks pay a dividend yield that's even higher than what they're paying interest on their bonds. Jim Cramer calls these accidental high yielders. We talked about that in the second live episode. We told you to look for good balance sheets and survivors that can roar back when the virus fades. We told you to look for those industries that will benefit going forward. We may have a whole new industry of telemedicine that wouldn't have ever gotten jump-started if it weren't for sheltering in place at home. We talked about retailers, Walmart, Walgreens, and others that are getting into medicine too, where it may change the way you see a doctor completely for the rest of eternity. We may never go to doctors in quite the same way again. We talked about American businesses that are filling the gaps where we have import shortages. We talked about technology companies that support working from home. All of these have been interesting ideas to look at. We also said that you should expect an infrastructure package coming because the Congress is in a spending mood and President Trump believes in infrastructure. So Wall Street Journal just yesterday, I think, has a headline, President Trump is calling for a new $2 trillion infrastructure bill. That's massive. That is huge. Now, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's like a freight train coming, and you better be ready for it. Medical companies are also developing novel treatments, and we said you should look for those companies that may change the face of medicine forever. We're moving more rapidly on advancing medicines than we ever have. The FDA is pulling out the regulations and the roadblocks, trying to maintain as much of the safety profile as possible, but getting medicine to sick people as rapidly as possible. We also said you should look for entrepreneurs. And there are a lot of entrepreneurs coming up with innovative things that will forever change the way we do business. And that's a good thing. So talk to your advisor. Make certain you have a properly balanced portfolio for your situation. We don't give advice here, but we give timeless information and quality up-to-date information. Now, what I think we shared in our first and our second live episode just kind of explains the value that we provide in the Economic War Room. We've just completed our second season on Blaze TV, and we've had some amazing guests. For example, if you were a viewer of Economic War Room, you would have heard from Rosemary Gibson back 2 years ago talking about how we got too many of our imported medicines from China. We were too dependent on supply chains for our healthcare needs. Most of the active pharmaceutical ingredient, like 90% of the drugs and the medicines you take, comes from China. And we warned they could threaten to use it as a weapon. And by the way, they have. They've done that. That was value you had. But we've also talked to people like Gordon Chang on China, or Frank Gaffney, or Lieutenant General Stephen Quast, or Brigadier General Robert Spalding. We've spoken with a former Apple CEO, Gil Amelio, an industry leader in 5G. We've talked to Star Parker, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Phil Robertson, Glenn Beck, Kevin and Sam Sorbo, Herman Cain, white hat hackers, Louis Gomer, Kyle Bass, and experts across multiple fields. And we brought it all down in something easy for you to understand, and we gave you a battle plan to read so that you knew exactly what you should be doing about this intelligence. So you need to get Blaze TV, and when you do, use the code ECON, E-C-O-N. That'll provide you the best discount of the year and a free trial if you want it. This is actionable intelligence. We bring you the brightest minds from around the world, and I believe we're well ahead of the curve. Now, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube Live right now, check out Blaze TV. Use the code word ECON at checkout, and you'll get the best offer of the year right now, as of today. And I don't know how long it's going to last, so run in there and get it. And if you're watching this afterwards, you might miss it. So check it out right now. You'll get 30% off and a free month trial. Now, there are other Blaze hosts. You don't just get the Economic War Room, you also get Glenn Beck and Mark Levin, Steven Crowder, Phil Robertson, Allie Beth Stuckey, Steve Deese, and many others. It's it's like a Netflix for conservatives, a conservative thought. And if you're at home watching, you now have access to the archives of all of these great programs. A lot of good entertainment, a lot of good information. Now, in the Economic War Room, we have a specialty, and we are the economics program on Blaze TV. So in our second live episode, we also told you there was an oil price that was underway, and oil prices have collapsed. They've dropped faster than just about any point in history. Here's a chart that we've got from dating back to 1950, and you can see that the current price of oil is in the same range it was during the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. That's how low oil prices have gone. And that's important to understand because it wouldn't be that way if we didn't have an American shale industry. Literally, we became energy independent. We were net exporters of energy because of the heroes and the patriots in fracking and the American shale industry. But they're right now facing serious difficulties. Did you know that if you went to West Texas yesterday, you could have talked to somebody producing oil and they'd have sold you a barrel of oil for as little as $10? Now, you have to add transportation costs on that if you were going to ship it by rail or by pipeline or whatever to get it out of there to the markets or to the refineries, but right at that moment, below $10 a barrel. Think about this in Canada. We have light sweet crude, West Texas intermediate crude. It's good oil, easy to use, easy to refine. But you go to Canada, they've got the heavier oil. In Canada, they were willing to sell a barrel of oil, I saw as low as $4.18 yesterday for a barrel of oil. That's less than a pint of beer in Canada. It's crazy right now. Why? Well, a lot of reasons, and we're going to cover all of these in an upcoming episode with our energy expert, Troy Andrews, and we'll be explaining exactly why storage is filling up, the demand has collapsed. Some people are even suggesting that at one point you go to West Texas or Canada and they will pay you to take the oil off their hands. That's like you had junk in your backyard and you had to pay somebody to haul it off. That's how bad it might get. Now today, just today, we heard that President Trump talked to Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, and Vladimir Putin and told him, stop this oil war that you're fighting. We've been talking about the oil war since the beginning of this program and how it impacts you because oil prices make up such an important part of our economy. It's not just the gasoline that you purchase, but it's the heat you put in your home in many cases. It's the cost of electricity. It's the cost of all sorts of things. Petroleum is used in all kinds of products, and it will impact you economically. And you need to understand that sometimes having low prices is beneficial because it drives your costs down. But if it costs us our shale industry and makes us dependent on Middle Eastern oil again, that would be very bad and very dangerous. Fortunately, the president seems to understand this. Now, That's what we recapped in the first live episode and the second live episode. Now we're at the third live episode talking about COVID-19 or the Chinese coronavirus. This one, what we want to focus on now is what I call second-order effects. What happens after we emerge from our mandated lockdown? What happens after shelter in place is called off and you can now go out back into your community? We need to talk about the domestic threats and the foreign threats and how they may impact you. Things that you may not be thinking of, but are happening behind the scenes that will have an impact on your life. Then we're going to step back and we're going to look at some hopeful things. There's always hope. And there's a lot of reasons for hope in America today. So stay tuned so you can hear the hopeful things as well. And also, what we can't cover. I couldn't cover this in a 5-hour show. There is so much information we have to share with you. So we're going to put it in our economic battle plan. And it'll be free to you. Stay tuned to this program. Just keep watching and you'll see how you can get a free copy of this battle plan and every battle plan. Now, let's talk about the second order effects. We've identified issues in 3 areas: political, economic, and personal. In the political threats, there are a lot of issues. There are many threats that are emerging right here at home. While you're sitting at home and you've not, thinking you're watching Netflix or whatever, there are issues that are popping up, and one of them that you may not be aware of is the massive increase in potential for election fraud. We've talked about election fraud. We walked through all the different ways election fraud might occur. We walked through, how they can do ballot harvesting and so forth. Everything we talked about is on steroids while you're sitting at home. Everything is on steroids while everybody's focused exclusively on the virus crisis. So let's think about this. There's a big push. Let's move the election online, they say. But we've proven, without question, with hackers, with evidence that is undeniable, that all electronic ballots could be hacked. In fact, electronic voting machines can be hacked. So imagine voting over the internet, how easily that could be manipulated and hacked. And then there's this term ballot harvesting. You may not know what ballot harvesting is, but let me tell you, there were solidly Republican counties in California, and they passed this new rule that says that people could go around to nursing homes and various places, and they could take ballots in and collect these ballots and turn them in. Guess what? All those solidly Republican counties all of a sudden started voting out their Republican representatives. And a lot of people think ballot harvesting had a lot to do with it. Can you imagine the impact if somebody comes in and threatens or coerces or intimidates or even just electioneers and suggests someone, hey, why don't you vote for someone? I'm voting. That is not acceptable. Ballot harvesting should not be allowed, and yet the Democrats tried to put it into the recovery package. They held up recovery for 2 days. People are waiting an extra couple of days to get their checks, to pay their bills, because Democrats were trying to sneak stuff like that into the bill. They got a lot of pork in there, but fortunately, they did not get that in there. And we need to worry about mail-in voting and all the other things that they're now pushing because, people are stuck at home. Don't fall for it. It's an opportunity for you to write your congressman. It's an opportunity for you to make phone calls. It's an opportunity for you to stand up. We've got to stop that. We'll put it in the battle plan. You got to respond to that. Now, there are many other threats besides election fraud emerging right now here while you're stuck at home. You've probably heard the term Trump derangement syndrome. You know what that means? That means people are going nuts. They're holding President Trump to standards that no president's ever been held to. They're accusing him of things falsely that are just absolutely not true because they're just so panicked because this evil white man's in power. It's just crazy. Trump derangement syndrome. Lie after lie. Falsely blaming President Trump for closing the pandemic office. That's not true. What they did was they streamlined and put multiple offices doing the same thing together and actually improved service for the pandemic approach. They didn't hurt it. They accused him of, falsely blamed him of muzzling Dr. Fauci. It's not true. Dr. Fauci said himself, you've been able to hear everything he said. And when he wants to contradict the president, he does it. It's not that he has been muzzled in any way. They called President Trump racist. Why? Because he early on in the crisis, he stopped air traffic from China. That was brilliant. That was huge. It saved lives, but they called him racist. They blamed him even for the death of a man who he and his wife purposely swallowed fish tank cleaner. Now, what did Trump have to do with that? Absolutely nothing. They're just looking, it's Trump derangement syndrome. They're just looking for anything to blame him for. Any honest, even critic, any honest critic should be able to see that President Trump is actually doing a pretty good job right now. And one of those critics is Mark Cuban. Take a look at this clip from Daily Caller with Mark Cuban on President Trump's performance.
You know, I'm curious, how do you think that the president is doing when it comes to addressing the citizens of America during this COVID-19 pandemic? And what kind of grade would you possibly give him?
Look, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, right? I'm not a fan of Donald Trump's as president. I haven't been for a while. But that said, he's obviously adjusted and adapted, and he's doing his best. You know, we are where we are. You know, in the past, it wasn't all that long ago when he was saying, you know, people were wondering how he understood medicine so well, right? That they thought, you know, he was just a genius for being able to understand all this stuff. But now he's kind of evolved to the point where he's putting his experts up front. You know, there's a reason why Dr. Fauci became a rock star, and he's only a rock star because Donald Trump stepped aside. You know, I forget the woman's name. She's a rock star as well, right? And the head of FEMA, the head of the Surgeon General. There's just people who have really put themselves out there and put themselves at risk. And during the press conferences, he steps aside. He's not even in camera shot. Now, and that's good. And I give him all the credit in the world. Do I like the side comments and the picking on journalists? No, never have, never will. That's who he is. But, you know, credit earned is credit deserved. And so I'll give him credit where we're at right now.
So I give credit to Mark Cuban for being honest. He's an honest critic. He sees the president's doing a good job, and he is. He has become like a wartime president. But those who oppose President Trump are trying to use this as their third swing at bat. Remember the failed Mueller report? Strike one. Then they had the impeachment hearings. Strike two. And by the way, the impeachment hearings continued even as the president was beginning to address the Chinese coronavirus threat. Now they see this. This is their third time at bat. But I need you to remember, in the early days of this crisis, the Democrats were focused only on impeachment. And they were giving the worst possible advice. Do you want to turn over leadership of this country to people like Nancy Pelosi, who as late as February 24th, that's just a little over a month ago, was urging crowds to gather in Chinatown? Look at this tweet. Pelosi, we do want to say to people, come to Chinatown. Here we are, come join us. Really? Go to Chinatown and gather in crowds in California on February 24th? And she's attacking the president for being clueless. She wasn't alone. New York Mayor de Blasio, as late as March 3rd, well after we were warning you, shelter in place is coming, avoid people, social distancing, he was telling people to go out on the town. This is a tweet from de Blasio. Since I'm encouraging New Yorkers to go on with your lives and get out on the town despite coronavirus. That's terrible advice. Is there any wonder why New York City is one of the biggest hotspots on the planet for coronavirus right now? This was March 3rd. Now, I can't debunk all of the lies in a single show, but we're going to cover a lot of them in the economic battle plan, and we're going to give you links to where you can go see what's being claimed and what the actual truth is. And there are even people like the Washington Post. The Washington Post runs their truth-telling thing where they say, well, it's one Pinocchio, it's kind of a lie, or two Pinocchios, it's a little bit of a lie. They've given 4 Pinocchios, as you'll see, to this Joe Biden smear that that Dr. Fauci was silenced, or the top CDC official in this case was silenced. It's just not true. These are unfortunate lies from the left wing trying to attack the president doing his job, and they're using the media. And, you know, fortunately, the Washington Post was honest about this one and said, no, that's a complete lie, Mr. Vice President. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you the facts, and you'll clearly see what's happening. But here's the risk. Right now, it's another attempted coup. They want to get the American people turning against President Trump, despite the fact that he's doing his best, according to Mark Cuban, and I'm actually doing a really pretty good job. They want to use this to take down the president. I'm going to take you back in the time machine. Just about 2 months ago, it's a little over 2 months ago, George Soros, he was in Davos, meeting of all the elite in Davos, and they're getting together. It seems like a lifetime ago because they're partying it up in Switzerland. But here's what he says, according to CNBC. George Soros warns Trump of potential economic doom before election. Wait, what? On January 23rd, the economy was rip-roaring, and Soros was saying, we might have economic doom. Really? What brought that on? He says, it says, liberal billionaire George Soros said Thursday that the U.S. economy could be headed for a calamity. He's talking calamity? Really? On January 23rd? He said the stock market's already celebrating. It's breaking out to reach new highs, but an overheated economy can't be kept boiling for too long. If this had all happened closer to the elections, it would have reassured his reelection. So he's kind of saying, hey, don't celebrate President Trump. The stock market's going to crash, the economy's going to go down. Based on what? Soros said Chinese President Xi Jinping is trying to exploit Trump's weaknesses. I don't know. This is remarkably prescient from a little over 2 months ago. Nobody was thinking or talking about a shutdown of the global economy. Nobody was talking about economic doom. Nobody was talking about a calamity, except George Soros. And what is he wanting from that? He's wanting it to end any chance for President Trump to be reelected. That's what I'm talking about, Trump derangement syndrome. That's the second political concern I have. The third political concern I have is actually communists already who've infiltrated this nation. They've infiltrated in the government and other places right now. And we have avowed socialist/communists sitting in the Congress right now. They're using this as an opportunity for disinformation. So it's not just Soros or the Democrats, it's domestic communists. I did an interview yesterday with Trevor Loudon. Trevor Loudon wrote the book, The Enemies Within. Tremendous book, and he's written a couple of others, and he's got a new film coming out shortly. So I asked him what his thoughts were regarding communists, disinformation, and the Chinese coronavirus. Let's take a look at what he
Well, Trump says the China virus, and he's quite right. But you've got to really blame, and you've got to really put the blame where it belongs, which is the Communist Party of China, the CCP, because they were the ones who covered up the virus for some time, as they covered up SARS before that. They didn't let people know what was going on. They kept people under wraps. They allowed a major festival, a potluck, New Year's potluck, to go on in Wuhan, knowing the disease was prevalent, where Chinese from all over the world would come there for these festivities, then return to Canada or San Francisco or Australia or New Zealand or Britain or wherever they were working. So they are guilty of, at very least, gross negligence, and maybe worse than that.
You know, Trevor went on in that interview, and we'll have it as a future episode of In the Economic War Room. He went on in the interview and pointed out that not only was the Chinese Communist Party hiding the reality of the virus spreading in their nation, but they were actually exporting it, not necessarily purposely, but it was coming from the Chinese Communist Party and into Chinese people all over the world. But also they've been running an active disinformation campaign through the people here. So we see left-wing media saying, oh, China got this under control. No, that's a lie. It is a lie. Our intelligence agencies have said, when you see statistics coming out of China, don't believe them. The Chinese people have gotten that information out, don't believe them. They've spread this disinformation campaign. What What's the purpose of it? The purpose of it is for you to say China didn't cause the virus, it's not a Chinese virus, and China stopped the virus in their country, and China's helping around the world. Yeah, they're helping. They've been sending defective test kits lots and lots of places. So that's something to watch out for. That's a political impact. Now let's switch. Let's talk about the economic threats. These are threats to your well-being, to your wallet, and to your portfolio. And the big one is deciding whether or not we're going to be facing inflation or depression or a little of both. Everyone everywhere right now is trying to get cash. They're worried about how much cash they have. So they're selling assets. They're trying to obtain, even treasury bonds. Foreigners are selling U.S. treasury bonds just to have cash. It looks like deflation. This is what happens in a depression. You know, when you have unemployment spike like we've seen, we had 6 million unemployment claims this week. It's crazy. Talking about 30% unemployment rate, at least temporarily. Stores are closing, companies going into bankruptcy. All of those things, that looks like a Great Depression. But it's different this time. It's different from the 1930s. And one of the differences is that the Federal Reserve has said they will backstop absolutely everything. They're going to make sure there's plenty of money in the system wherever they go. Whatever you need money for, the Federal Reserve is going to make sure there's plenty of cash there. Their balance sheet has just hugely increased to over $5 trillion. And we're looking at government spending and deficits like we had during World War II. Yeah, $2 trillion stimulus bill. Boom, we're going to do it. Let's do a $2 trillion infrastructure bill. All of these things leave the potential for creating massive amounts of inflation. Now I'm going to quote, reading from Barron's last week, injecting trillions into the economy through fiscal policy that aims to put money in American households and businesses and the Fed's pumping of liquidity into the financial system could help fill the short-term economic hole dug by efforts to contain the coronavirus. But once the pandemic recedes, significant longer-term effects might be apparent, and they aren't likely to be positive. Continue reading. Wartime finances that balloon budget deficits and that are covered by money printing have proved inflationary throughout history. At the same time, globalization, already in retreat in the trade wars, will be curtailed further as supply chains are relocated to avoid crossing borders rather than to maximize comparative advantage. That will raise the cost of internationally traded goods at a time when prices of services already are moving higher. Now they quote Julian Brigden of Macro Intelligence 2 Partners, who says this is going to be very inflationary. So what does that mean to you? Everyone's raising cash, and it might be good for now. But if you liquidate all the stuff you've got, the stocks, the bonds, everything you've got, and just bring it back into cash, you're going to find out if we hit inflation that cash is a very bad investment in inflation. You don't want to hold cash in inflation because you're losing purchasing power every single day. If you've seen the pictures of the streets of Venezuela, when their inflation rate spiked, people just started dumping money in the streets. Toilet paper is more valuable. Well, yeah, toilet paper is more valuable than a lot of things these days, but it is certainly more valuable than the Venezuelan currency. The Fed is making cash available actively, as much as you need, and that's good. That'll help us bridge this gap. But what happens when we come out? You got to watch for inflation. So you need to get with your advisor and see how this may not only impact your portfolio, but how could it impact your household budget? What are you going to do about that when you emerge? Now, that's the first economic impact that you may not have thought of. You may not be thinking about that at all. But there's a second economic impact that this one is longer term. This one is very scary, and it's something we've talked about in the Economic War Room before. Episode 80, for example, on ESG. ESG, environmental, social justice, and corporate governance. Governance is the G. You need to watch episode 80. If you're not a subscriber, you should go right now and subscribe so you can see this important episode and get your free battle plan. You can get it at economicwarroom.com. The bottom line is this. Corporate boards and investment managers have decided that for you, profit shouldn't be the primary motive. They manage your money. They manage the companies you own shares in, but they're not trying to get the highest profit any longer. Those corporations that have given over to the ESG idea, What they want to do is they want to have social justice be more important. They want governance to be more important. And what do they mean by that? They mean the corporate boards ought to have broad gender diversity. Okay, I get it. It's beneficial to have both men and women on boards because they have different perspectives, different ideas, and so I get that. That's a good idea. It's something that we all should support. But mandated like a quota system, that's what they're doing. How about this? They said that's just the start to have women on the board. Maybe we need to have half of the board comprised of women. Okay, maybe we do. Then they said that's the beginning. Then we need broad gender diversity. Really? You got men and you got women. What do they mean? Of course they're bowing to the LGBTQ movement. Does that mean you have to have a born male transsexual on your board? Does that mean you have to have a born female now identifying as male? That is not the way to run corporations. It's craziness, and yet that's what they're doing. Here's the next thing they're doing. They're mandating that corporations become climate change supporters, that they support efforts to combat climate change, which means that they're going to make everything green to their standards regardless of what you as the shareholder wants. I'm on a task force that's studying this problem, and it's only getting worse. These guys aren't backing down while we have the coronavirus. They're actually accelerating in their demands for what happens on corporate boards, and they're taking this opportunity while you're maybe not paying as much attention, and they're trying to mandate it and push it through. It's a takeover of corporations by the left. Now again, if you aren't yet a Blaze TV subscriber, you got to see episode 80 on ESG. And don't forget, you get a free trial and 30% off if you use the code word ECON. That's the best offer you'll get all year long. It's maybe for a limited time. So rush out and do that as soon as you can. You'll get the best of Blaze, Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, Phil Robertson, Steven Crowder, but you'll also get all of our free battle plans at economicwarroom.com. Now, we talked about two economic threats. The third economic threat is this one. It's nationalization. The government rescue package does come with some strings, and there's a big push. They tried to put in nationalizing all our industries. The Democrats on the far left wanted to nationalize the airlines, nationalize Boeing, nationalize all these oil companies, nationalize all these things. That's not a good idea. It's bad for the economy. Countries that have nationalized economies where all the private industry is now working for the government, they don't do as well as free enterprise. They don't do as well as liberty. Many companies, through no fault of their own, are suffering during this government-mandated nationwide shutdown. This is socialism, communism, or even worse. This is a huge threat to the economic liberty of our nation. That's why we have this economic war room, to tell you of these threats and also to work behind the scenes. And the more viewers we have, the more authority we have when we speak in Washington. So go to economicwarroom.com and sign up, get our battle plans, and also sign up to watch our episode. Second threat we talked about is economic. The third threat is about your personal liberties. There are risks right now to your constitutional rights. Both the First and the Second Amendments are under fire. For example, there's a massive attack on free speech. Don't believe me? Go post something that says you're not sure that the coronavirus is as dangerous as people think. Post that out there and see how long it lasts up there. Question why your hospital doesn't have a lot of people there. I'm not telling you coronavirus isn't dangerous. In fact, we were among the leaders telling you it is a threat. It is a health threat. It's dangerous, and we've got to prepare for it. I'm not denying it. I'm not a coronavirus denier. But those who are finding their speech censored right now on the major social media platforms. Social media is silencing anyone who would question government information. That's dangerous. So what if the government's right this time? There may come a time when the government's wrong and they just shut you up. That's not how our free speech is supposed to work. We need to have the right to tell the government to speak truth to power, and they're silencing it. And who determines that? I think it's a horrible precedent. Here's a headline from TechCrunch. Facebook, Reddit, Google, LinkedIn, Microsoft, Twitter, and YouTube issue joint statement on misinformation. Okay, I don't want people out there telling people, hey, there's no problem with coronavirus. Go out and party and get in crowds and all. I think that'd be dangerous. I understand that. But when this group comes together, all the social media comes together and says they're going to censor speech that the government doesn't like, that is dangerous. It's a threat to your free speech right that's supposed to be enshrined in the Constitution. There's also a threat and an attack on religious liberty. Now, I'll give you 3 examples. Example one is they're shutting down churches. You know what? I do not want to attend church right now and sit next to my neighbor that I love and possibly be breathing and touching and shaking hands. I don't want to do that. I don't think that's a good idea. And I understand why there's a government order in place. It's probably a good idea for safety. For example, if there was a building that was in dangerous shape, that needed to be condemned, the government could condemn it and say, hey, look, this building is unsafe, you can't go in there. I get that for a limited time. But that's a dangerous power if it's ever used arbitrarily. China shuts down churches because the government doesn't approve of the church. We can never let that happen. So we have to draw the line fierce and hard here. It shouldn't be government mandate. It should be calling up the pastor of the church and saying, help me with this. Do your churches online. Don't go to, and tell the people, don't go to church. Now, is it okay for the government to issue a temporary order? Yes. I'm not saying it's not. But I'm saying it's a dangerous line we best not cross. I'll give you a second attack on religious liberty, and this one's disguised, but it's equally dangerous, if not more so. The New York Times had a nonsense article blaming Christians for the coronavirus. I mean, the thing started in Wuhan, China, not by Christians. It started supposedly from people eating bats. Some other people say it started in a virus lab. Wherever it started, it emanated from China. There's no question about that. And here's the truth. It's not Christians that caused it to spread. But the article says, the religious right's hostility to science is crippling our coronavirus response. That's nuts. We have a very scientific response. You can see the scientists talking to the president. You may agree or disagree, but it is not being led by the religious right. You know, they blamed President Trump. They blamed him for saying, I hope we have an Easter miracle. Well, you know what? I hope we have a Palm Sunday miracle. I'm praying for some unexpected announcement to come out on Palm Sunday that changes everything. I'm believing for that. I'm expecting that. But I'm still staying home, sheltering in place with my family. I'm still using good hygiene practices. I'm still social distancing. I'm doing the kinds of things that science is telling us we need to be doing. I'm trying to follow that too. So don't blame the Christians. That's an attack on your religious liberty. And you know what? It got even more direct. There were attacks on the MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell. It's crazy. But Mike Lindell gets up and says, hey, I'm going to turn my pillow factory into making mouth coverings and masks and trying to help this shortage problem that we have that was created because we depended solely on Chinese supply lines for these things. I'm going to help solve that problem and turn my factories into this. And he got up and he had an opportunity and he shared from his faith. If you knew Mike Lindell, and I've met him a few times and I admire him greatly, if you knew Mike Lindell, you'd know he's a former drug addict that was saved by Christianity. He believed God saved him through his Christian faith and healed him of his drug addiction and got him to be a successful entrepreneur. Now he wants to give back and help the country, and the guy gives money all the time. Very generous man. And he wanted to give God a little bit of glory and credit when he had the microphone. Can you blame him? Well, the left blamed him. They thought, oh my gosh, he suggested we read our Bible. How awful, we can't have this. Are you kidding me? That's an attack on your religious freedom. You know what? This is wrong. And we need to stand up for people, good people like Mike Lindell and MyPillow. So let me sum up. We have a massive domestic threat going on. Remember what Rahm Emanuel, when he was chief of staff to President Obama, said? He said, you never let a serious crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before. Now that's echoed. There's a Democrat congressman, in fact, he's a leader. He's the majority whip in Congress from South Carolina, Representative James Clyburn. And he told caucus members last week that the bill, the rescue package, when you were hurting, wondering how you're going to pay your bills, he says this is a tremendous opportunity to restructure things to fit our vision. Well, their vision is to deny you religious liberty, to deny you free speech, and to deny you your Second Amendment gun rights. And that's crazy. When you looked at the rescue bill that the Democrats proposed and why they held up your check for several days, they wanted a wish list. They had their political grab bag filled with pork and political favors. And they wanted even more. Some of the things that got pulled out were things like ballot harvesting, we've talked about, early voting, same-day registration, mail-in votes, no ID required, cash to illegal immigrants, not just citizens, not just taxpayers. They wanted control of corporations at the government level. They wanted climate change laws included in there, included as things such as mandating that airlines were climate neutral by a certain date. How can you mandate airlines? Airlines don't make the airplanes. You can't mandate that the airlines are climate. How do you do that? But that's what they wanted. Oh yeah, we'll rescue you, but you have to be climate neutral. You know what that'd do to airfare prices? They would go through the roof. They wanted to take over your economy. They were worried more about gender issues, and they weren't focused on saving lives and saving the economy. That's the domestic threat. Our friend Star Parker, she wrote this. Star Parker, you've seen her in the Economic War Room. She said, Democrats blackmail a nation in crisis. Their demands are like telling a patient on life support that he must sign off on gender-neutral restrooms before we agree to connect his ventilator. Star is right. This was a power grab. Fortunately, a lot of the bad stuff was removed from the bill, but our response was delayed by days unnecessarily. The crisis and the economy worsened, and it was such a massive bill, who knows what else was stuffed in there that we didn't get out. It's a domestic threat, no question. Now, they've also talked about confiscating guns, changing gun laws, all of those things, Second Amendment protections. New Orleans, they're doing that. It really is scary. We've got to stand up for our civil rights as well. Now, we talked about the second order effects on domestic issues and domestic threats. Let's shift gears a second and talk about foreign threats, because there's a lot of them, and they're really running crazy right now. Right now, China is running a global propaganda effort supported by Russia, and we're going to cover that in the battle plan for this episode. China is also using the crisis that they started to win over nations suffering under COVID-19. Oh, we're here to your rescue. We solved this problem in China, which is a lie, and we're here to rescue you in Europe and Africa and Asia and Latin America. China has also reopened the wet markets. Now, wait a minute. If they really have caused the problem really did emerge from the wet markets, why are they reopening those wet markets and allowing people to buy bats for food again? That's crazy. China is also falsifying statistics about what's going on. I mean, you look at the curve, the Johns Hopkins curve, China, it says 82,000. It's been at 82,000 for a couple of weeks now, total infected in China. I don't believe it. I didn't believe it before, but now I have proof. Secretary Pompeo said, nations withholding coronavirus statistics are endangering people's lives. Well, guess what? China is withholding coronavirus statistics. Take a look at the chart. Does anyone really believe these statistics that they stopped the virus? It's not true. In fact, our intelligence agencies yesterday, it came out that they have concluded that China is lying about the number of patients they have in their nation right now. Now consider this from Daily Wire. Here's a quote. Scientific advisors have reportedly told British Prime Minister Boris Johnson that the Chinese Communist government has downplayed the true extent of the coronavirus outbreak in their country, and that the real number could be 15 to 40 times higher than what China has reported. Think about how that puts all of us at risk. They claim it's been solved there, so if we get ours solved here, we don't have to worry about interacting with China. Wait a minute. We could be working to eradicate a disease right now that's exploding there. We know they lied and covered up about the beginning of the disease. And Axios did a study. An Axios study found that 95% of the deaths that we've had and will experience would have been completely avoided had the Chinese been truthful from the very beginning. They weren't. They lied. People died. And now they're continuing to lie. We've got to be wary of that foreign threat. It's very real. There's one more big foreign threat, and we'll cover all these threats in the economic battle plan, but this one is a risk to the dollar. Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran are all attempting to undermine the dollar. That's not news. They've been doing this for really Russia since 2009, China since 2013. Iran and North Korea didn't have the capability of doing it, but now they've joined with Russia and China calling for an end of the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. But they're getting a better case out of it right now because our federal debt is growing. It was growing out of control. It's growing even more rapidly with these big stimulus and recovery packages. So we covered this in episode 79. We talked with my friend Dr. Gal Luft from Israel, and we had a great interview with him on his book on de-dollarization. You can watch episode 79 on Blaze TV. Remember, you get a free trial and you get a 30% discount right now if you use the code ECON, E-C-O-N. So let me read to you. This isn't just my conjecture, and I've been worried about the dollar for a while, but Bloomberg has a headline. This is March 31st, so it's just a few days ago. Their headline, coronavirus could end dollar's reign in favor of China. Think about that. That's a headline in Bloomberg. According to Michael Howell of London's Cross Border Capital Limited, this is a call that the U.S. is about to lose its exorbitant privilege of having the world's reserve currency. This has kept its funding costs low and enabled it to buy foreign assets cheaply. This mantle may be passing to China. Now, I know predictions like this have been made before and they've failed miserably to come true. Thank goodness for us. But at least now there's a clear reason why it might be different this time, and that's the coronavirus. Would China do that? Would they hurt us? Would they dethrone the dollar? Would they kill it? Well, before you say, nah, they wouldn't do that, take a look at this cartoon from China Daily. You got to understand, China Daily is the official English language paper of the Chinese Communist Party. There's the coronavirus, sitting in the easy chair. His work has been done. The smoking gun is there. The spurs are up in the easy chair. The cowboy hat's on, smoking a cigarette and smiling. Why? Because his trophy, he killed the stock markets. Right there on the wall, there's a bull's head. That's the official Chinese English language newspaper from the Chinese Communist Party. They're rejoicing over the fact that they killed your bull market. Why? Well, maybe they think it'll dethrone President Trump. Maybe they think that it'll dethrone America. Maybe they think it will kill the dollar. But yes, they're smiling. At least this virus is smiling at a job well done. Let's not let it be a job well done. The economic war room, we can fight back, and that's why you need the battle plan to learn how you can fight back too. Because if we lose the reserve currency, we would lose the ability to fund our debt with foreign purchases. With oil prices collapsing, the value and the usefulness of the petrodollar has collapsed. The petrodollar means everybody that buys or sells oil, they do so in dollars, and when Saudi Arabia gets excess dollars, they turn around and invest them in America. Well, it's easier to get excess dollars when oil prices are $50, $60, or $100 a barrel. But when oil prices have fallen as low as $10 a barrel at the wellhead, Saudi Arabia is probably not getting nearly as much money for that oil. And with our excessive debt, we're going to need foreigners to buy more of our debt, not less. Our need for them to buy our bonds has never been greater. And we have a cabal of nations wanting to stick it to America. That's why episode 79 and our battle plan is so important for you, especially now, because that's going to have real impacts on your portfolio and real impacts on your job and your economic future. Now, it's not all bad. There's actually lots of good going on. And in fact, China may come out not better from this, but far worse, especially when the world community realizes how much they've been lied to and how they caused this problem and let it get out of hand. So there are some good things that may emerge, which may be, if communism were called into question inside China, that would be tremendous, because the Chinese people and the Chinese nation is a marvel of the world. Some of the finest culture, some of the finest people, some of the most amazing things have emerged from China and can emerge from China going forward. They just need a better system. They need personal liberty. They've been controlling everything. They've been harvesting human organs. They've been doing all sorts of bad things, monitoring the Uyghur Muslim population and putting them in concentration camps, shutting down churches, restricting individuals for thought. If they had a better system, a free system, a liberty system, can you imagine how great China would be? Now, what we've got is we've got the opportunity for Americans to come together, and it's happening right now. Americans helping one another across this country. I don't know about you, but my email is lighting up with people saying, hey, let's go help here, let's go help there. Not actually physically gathering in crowds, but following CDC guidelines, social distancing, but helping people. If somebody's got extra of something, they're helping somebody who doesn't have it. And coming up with great ideas, great inventions, great opportunities. People are standing up for liberty, and they're ignoring what appear to be false and misleading media narratives. And science is advancing. We're literally looking at hundreds of potential medicines being reviewed right now to address the crisis. And one of them might even have the possibility, for example, we come up with one that addresses the coronavirus, we might actually find a cure for the common cold. Free enterprise is at work addressing critical shortages. We're moving supply lines and supply chains back to the United States. We're rebuilding manufacturing here. Americans coming together, working with Americans. There's a lot of good stories going on. Now, while China has sent out defective masks and defective tests to multiple nations in need, free market suppliers have gotten very creative. Now, this is a British example. But this is Dyson. You know Dyson, the vacuum cleaner? Dyson's a billionaire, and he's an absolute genius. And he came up with a low-cost ventilator in just 10 days' time. It's a Dyson machine, and he donated 5,000 of these units to the British government, and they're buying even more. This is an entrepreneurial renaissance. We're cutting red tape and regulations so that people can be entrepreneurs again, and that is a good thing. Abbott Labs has also developed a 5-minute coronavirus test, and they should deliver 50,000 of those tests a day. 50,000 tests a day starting next week, and it just takes a 7-pound portable kit. So we're solving the testing problem. Johnson & Johnson has poured over $1 billion into a vaccine. Normally it would take 15 years to go through all of the testing, the vaccine and everything else to develop something and get it to market. But we could have it in less than a year, which would be important to us if we have a second wave of virus, especially if China's been lying to us about what's happened there. And I'm certain they have. They're having a second wave there. Second wave could hit here after the summer, and we need to be ready. And my friend Benjamin Nusma, he has a breakthrough with artificial intelligence, a breakthrough with algorithms that is talking about how you can track the virus that could allow us to open our economy much, much sooner. I'll just give you a sneak peek because we're going to put this out on YouTube and Facebook shortly. But when we talk to Benjamin, he's just looking, do you need the same social distancing, shelter-in-place regulations in Idaho, for example, as you do in New York City? You know, people in Idaho don't live nearly as close together. They don't live in big apartment buildings unless they're in the cities, and even the big cities are nothing like in New York. But people in rural Idaho, are you kidding me? They might live a mile from their neighbor. The population density is so small compared to the big cities. You know what? The current ratings of Idaho say, well, people are moving around more in Idaho than they are in New York, and so they're not as prepared for this virus. What they're not recognizing is they might have to drive 3, 4, 5, 6 miles to get to a grocery store to get supplies, whereas people in New York might be able to just go out on the street and across the street and they can pick up their groceries. So they rate them F for preparation because they're traveling more. Well, Benjamin's artificial intelligence at Navigo is much better than that. It actually takes into account all the factors, and it takes into account the health factors. You know, when you shut down the economy, did you know this? Suicide rates go up. So there are people dying in counties that maybe don't have to shelter in place because there's not a single sign of a virus in that county. And if we have good testing, we can test people and put them back to work. We need an intelligent way to reopen our economy as soon as possible. And so our interview with Benjamin Newsome is phenomenal. You need to get your subscription to Economic War Room so you can see interviews like that. He's a great entrepreneur, and he's got a breakthrough that could put us back to work much sooner. The point is this: Americans are rising to the occasion. We need to be vigilant. We had to prepare, and we did. That's why you need the Economic War Room. We told you to prepare in advance. That's why we need you to spread the word about the Economic War Room. If you're already a Blaze TV subscriber, great, thank you. Tell your friends. Get them to download our battle plans from economicwarroom.com. And if you're not yet a subscriber, you're just watching on YouTube or Facebook Live, then sign up now and get the best offer of the year. This won't last long, but as this is aired, you can get a free trial and 30% off using the code word ECON. Now, we're about to enter one of the holiest seasons of the year for people who are religious. Resurrection Sunday for Christians, or Easter, Passover for our Jewish friends. This is a celebration of God saving His people. And at Passover, originally God saving His people from a plague. And they turned to the Lord, and they stood together as families, and they sheltered in their home, and the plague of death passed over. That's where the name comes from it. It's a celebration of God saving people. It's a time for prayer. This Sunday is Palm Sunday. I truly believe God is going to do something amazing in this crisis. And we should be crying out to Him in prayer. We should be worshiping God Almighty, and we should be praying Psalm 91. Look it up. It talks about protection from the perilous pestilence and how no plague can come near your dwelling. Those are promises I claim for my family from the Bible. Something you could pray over your family, and you could pray over our nation. I don't know what's going to happen, but I have a feeling in my gut that we may get some good word on Palm Sunday, an announcement that will be unexpected, but also good news. That's been building in my spirit for a couple of weeks. I think we should watch for that. I know this is a challenge. It's a challenge for you and your family. It's a challenge because your kids can't go to school. College students are home. You may not be able to go to work. You may not know where your next meal is coming from. It's a challenge, and I'm praying for you. I'm praying for all our viewers, praying for this nation. But it's also an opportunity for us to rebuild America. The Democrats say, let's remake America in our image. No, let's rebuild America according to the Constitution and the liberties that we've been guaranteed. It's a time for us to reset our family and our finances if we keep our heads. Economic War Room wants to be part of that. We want to help you. It's a place where you can download this episode's battle plan, which will have a summary, action steps, a link to the articles. There'll be a lot more information in the battle plan than you're able to even get watching this. And we're giving you an opportunity to subscribe to Blaze TV for 30% off plus a free month. Just use the code word ECON. I want you to stay tuned. And I want you to pray. Please pray with me. Join with me as we pray for health, for wisdom, for blessing, for understanding, and for a chance for this nation to return to truth. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.